In this video, I give answers to the top 7 questions I've received from landlords about the brave new world of 2025. I'm Suzanne Smith, lawyer turned landlord, and I run the independentlandlord.com website and this YouTube channel. So let's get on with question number 1. First one is, will the Renters' Rights Bill kill buy-to-lets? In a word, no. I don't think it will kill the standard buy-to-let. Well, why? It comes down to supply and demand, because people still need homes. There's not enough social housing, the population is still growing, and not everyone can afford to buy their homes. Sure, we'll need to adapt as we won't have fixed terms anymore. We'll need to increase rent differently and get used to open-ended tenancies when tenants can leave at any time. And it will be more complicated to increase the rent. But it comes down to the fact that the more landlords who sell up, the less supply there will be and demand will go up. And I'm certainly not selling up. In fact, I'd like to buy another one. But with all investments, it comes down to whether or not you're getting a return, whether you're actually making money net after tax. Does the property cash flow, or are you keeping it in hope that it might go up in value? And if that's the case, well, you need to be careful there because property prices are very unpredictable, just as you can see with the property prices in London over the last 5-10 years. We'll have to focus more on customer service and making sure that we look after our properties. But then we should be doing that anyway. Okay, the next question is, what about HMO landlords? What does 2025 look for them? Well, yes, life will become more difficult for HMO landlords once the Renters' Rights Bill comes into effect, assuming that there aren't any changes. This is because there'll be no fixed terms, so there'll be a greater turnover of tenants. It will be less predictable when people come and go because there'll be no minimum period for tenancies, and tenants will be able to serve a notice to quit at any time with 2 months' notice. And so because of the increase in the notice period, it's likely that voids will be longer as well because you'll be having to kind of mix and match with people not wanting to leave until they've found someone to go to. But one advantage of HMO landlords is that they will have their own data about the market rent when they increase rents and in the event that a tenant appeals, because they'll be able to show, well, I let exactly the same room in the house last year for this amount, or a very similar room in the same house last week. And then that will be very, very good data. Question 3, what about the student market? How will the Renters' Rights Act affect the student market? Well, this is a really good question. And I'm normally, glass half full, but I'm not that about the student market. It's difficult to overstate the impact that the Renters' Rights Act will have on the student market. I think it will be a bit like Brexit, with lots of promised improvements for students, but it'll end up making everything worse. And why is that? Well, I mentioned that there'll be no more fixed term contracts. And this means that students will be able to terminate whenever they like. The tenancies won't align to the academic year anymore. And landlords won't be able to ask for rent on a termly basis. And it looks like rent in advance will be abolished as well. And so that will increase the risk for landlords who let to foreign students. And if one student tenant drops out and serves notice, it will bring the whole tenancy to an end if they're on a joint tenancy. Whereas at the moment, the remaining tenants are incentivized to find a replacement because otherwise they're going to have to cover the rent if they don't. It will make planning harder for student landlords. And I suspect that landlords will stop the practice of signing up students a long time in advance, and they'll do it closer to the start of the academic year to reduce the risk. And I can see why this is bad for landlords, but actually it's difficult for students. My own children have been students fairly recently, and they found it very difficult knowing in October who they're going to be friends with at the end of the year, let alone who they want to live with the following academic year. And I think that that's something that the government is taking into account with these rules. They want to make it easier for students to be able to come and go the same as everybody else and not be tied in. Now, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying that this is why the government's doing it. There is a new ground for eviction for full-time students who are in an HMO, but this is only a little bit of conflict. It's very rare that landlords have to go to court to get their property back. The overwhelming majority of students move out as soon as they can. I've also been asked a lot, will Labour bring in rent controls? There's been a lot about it in the media, and there have been lots of campaigns. Both Angela Rayner and Matthew Pennycook have made it very clear that they won't bring in rent controls.
Rent controls restrict housing supply, which doesn't help anyone.
We remain opposed to the introduction of rent controls.
So I guess we'll just have to take them at their word. Question 5. Will I be able to increase rents when the Renters' Rights Bill comes into effect? Yes, you will be able to increase rents, but it's going to change. You're going to have to use a Section 13 notice. And I've done a whole video, well, it's a short video on how to do a Section 13 notice. But there's likely to be more appeals by tenants because it'll be easier for tenants to appeal because they'll have nothing to lose. The rent won't be more than what the landlord's proposing, and it'll even delay when the rent comes into effect. But you can find out more about it in my Section 13 Form 4 video. Also, with rents only forecast to go up 3% in 2025 anyway, and now that inflation has come down quite a lot, maybe landlords actually won't bother putting up in tenancy rent in the future. And it will go back how it used to be before COVID, when landlords mostly just put the rent up in between tenancies. And I have a whole video on what's happening to rent in 2025, which you can watch. Question 6. When will the Renters' Rights Act come into effect? Well, I'm placing my bets on October. There had been some thought about it being the summer, but I think that's too soon. So the earliest I think is going to be October. At the moment, when I'm recording this at the beginning of January, it's still not cleared the House of Commons, and it's going to do that on the 14th of January. And then it will have to go through the House of Lords and get royal assent, and then there'll be a bit of notice before it comes into effect. They'll have regulations as well. So I think that this will take us to the other side of the summer. And the lucky 7 question. When is the last day that I can serve a Section 21 notice? Well, that's the day before the commencement date, which, as I said, I think might be October at the earliest. Might be wrong there. But if you do serve a Section 21 notice just before the commencement date, you'll need to bring proceedings for an order for possession within 3 months of the commencement date. And so that doesn't leave you much time, because the notice itself takes 2 months, and then you'll have to apply for an order for possession. And it's you're going to have to get your skates on and make sure you use a proper lawyer. So that brings me to the end of this Q&A. I hope you found it useful. And if you'd like to find out more on the practical implications of the Renters' Rights Act, take a look at my series, The Renters' Rights Bill Explained. And I do lots more practical content for landlords on other topics as well. And you can always leave a comment below if you'd like me to answer other questions on the Renters' Rights Act or anything else. And if you'd like to keep up to date, you can subscribe to this channel or my free weekly newsletter at theindependentlandlord.com/subscribe. See you soon.